Hello, I am Andrea Lochin, and you're watching Publishing. Our guest today is our Ukrainian version of Ernest Hemingway. He's a heavy-set man with a big heart named Borys Humenyuk. He's a writer who went to war in the east of country voluntarily. The program should be very touching.
Борисе, дуже багато письменників, поетів в Україні.
Borys, many Ukrainian writers today write about the war as our country is at war. But I know only one among them whose books were published before the war. It was easy to find books by Borys Humenyuk in Ukrainian bookstores. But one day he suddenly took a rifle and joined a volunteer battalion.
Він взяв автомат і пішов до Бробат. Як письменник...
Tell me, how does a writer go to war?
Ніхто не розуміє.
Actually, it's very simple. First, you go to your neighbor and say to him, Ole, I'm joining a battalion. They lack weapons there. Sell me your carbine. Here's $800. If anything happens, say I threatened you and took your weapon by force. You take a friend who also took his neighbor's gun because we didn't own one.
Береш своє авто, заливаєш повний бак солярки і їдеш в Азов.
Fill your car's tank full of diesel and drive to Azov. You arrive at Azov battalion and say, don't mind that I am 50 years old and weigh 120 kilograms. I can hide in a trench, so move aside. I want to fight with you. I will be their older brother and comrade. If I'm able to shoot, I'll shoot. If not, I'll cook. But if this is the situation we're in, I must be here. There's no other way for me. They say that at war people of all kinds of professions meet in the trenches. It can be a rabbi, an outlaw, a writer, or an American. It doesn't matter because in the trenches, all of them are brother in arms. How does it work? These were fantastic things by the time my war began, which started symbolically on June 22, 2014. When I came to my senses, when I began fighting in the Azov battalion in Mariupol, I took a better look at those around me and suddenly realized that there were men who had three convictions, but there were also men who had 3 degrees. There are people whose level of education remained at that of Ivasik Telesik or Kotihoroshko, and there are people who read Hemingway, Oksana Zabushko, and watched Tarkovsky's films. There are people who have academic degrees and former seminarians who abandoned studying at the seminary, having written to the dean, "Forgive me, Father Vasil, for leaving the seminary. I'm going to atone my sins, but in a different way. If I return alive, I will continue my study, and I want to be a shepherd and a priest someday." If it won't happen, so be it. There were Muslims, Buddhists, Jews, Christians of all confessions, Russians, Belarusians, Swedes, and Germans, because it was a war of all against all, a war of the forces of good versus evil and darkness. It is not a conflict in eastern Ukraine, rather a choice of world outlook. People choose. Either we are on the side of light that will bring us victory, or somewhere that are for the money of Mordor. We know about the past wars mostly from the works of writers. Our descendants will learn about the current war from the works of Borys Humenyuk. Because he was there, he shot and he killed. He's incredible.
Із творів Бориса Гуменюка, тому що він там був, він стріляв, убивав, я не знаю. Він неймовірний. Знаєте, от чесно вам скажу, знаєте, кажуть, іноді священна війна.
They sometimes call it a holy war, which has a notion of jihad. But sometimes one has to choose not just between us and the enemy, but between good and evil. It is actually very clearly outlined. It's how we writers make money by adding pathos. I wrote for 20 years before the war, if I can say so. My first book was published in 1993. When I came to war, I mainly wanted the meat of life, the meat of war. But on the other hand, I deliberately rejected the extremely negative aspects and wanted to sanctify the Ukrainian soldier. Even more, I wanted to tell a true story. In general, the history of Ukrainian culture is the history we always knew from someone else, that was told from the outside, and which told about how we lived, struggled, and fought. We were told why we fought badly, why our heroes were wrong, and why they're this way.
Не такі і неправильні, чому взагалі вони ось такі. От, ну, принаймні в сусідній країні, в Російській Федерації.
At least in the neighboring country of Russia, which is our opponent, including the military, there was always a great bard who could tell about this at a very high artistic level.
Міг на дуже високому мистецькому рівні це розповісти. Я вже навіть і жартував, що можливо...
I've probably already told the joke that the first civil war and the invasion of Napoleon in Russia were just so that Leo Tolstoy could finish his novel.
Лев Толстой мав можливість написати роман. От, але справді ми знаємо про ту війну, про не так з підручників історії, як з романів Толстого. Ми знаємо про...
But we know about that war not as much from history textbooks as from Tolstoy's novels. We know about the Civil War from Sholohov's and Quietly Flows the Dawn. We have Fedor Bondarchuk and his The Ninth Company. And there is the song Combat about the Chechen War. There was always someone who presented it at a more or less artistic level. They're also going to write about this war and sing and make movies about how a nice young man from Ryazan, Vologda or Perm went to the Donbass to defend his brethren, the Russian people in the Donbass, from the cursed Banderites, meaning Western Ukrainians. The task of Ukrainian culture and writers is to not give them the opportunity to falsify this part of history and stop their lies about this war. They must tell about this war through our voice and call a spade a spade.
Розказати цю війну з власного голосу, розказати такою, якою вона є.
Borys, I've been studying your biography and facts. A writer went to war and started writing poems there. He used to write poems, but it was 20 years ago. He had been a prose writer, and then the war broke out, and the poet was born again.
Борис Humenyuk писав вірші, але це було років 20 тому, як на мене. Після цього він був прозаїком, і тут, опа, війна.
How do you write your poems? Does it take you long to choose words for them? And when do you find time to do this while the war is raging?
Його там щось добирають довго. Коли це робити? Війна. Правда? Стріляє. Чому?
Я сам не розумію. Я взагалі не розумію, як люди...
I don't know myself. I also don't understand how people can make poetry their profession. If something major happens, love, for example, you write a poem. You're put in jail, you write a poem. You go to war, you write a poem. When there's none of that, what do you write about? Because poems are emotions, but definitely not a profession. And what is war? You pick up a gun for the first time and take a first shot. You shoot a person for the first time. Other persons shot at you for the first time. You saw someone wounded for the first time, tried to stop the bleeding, saw a severed limb, saw a prisoner, and interrogated him. Those emotions are overwhelming. Where do I direct this flow of emotions? I don't know. Why do fighters after the front need rehabilitation and psychologists to readapt to society? It's very easy for a writer. You write poems. Free verse is not just concentration of energy. You also delete punctuation, break the sentence in places and inject some energetic.
Ти викидаєш розділові знаки, ти ламаєш в якомусь місці речення і даєш енергетичний...
Але це вірш.
But it's like a poem. These are actually poems. It's not prose.
Як летить автоматна черга, от ти так і пишеш.
And you write just how a tank moves and how a burst of bullets flies. I didn't even think what it was. I didn't think it was a free verse. I didn't think it was poetry. I didn't think that 21 years after my first poem collection, I'd return to poetry again. I just wrote something on my tablet and posted on Facebook.
А як взагалі це відбувається? Скажіть, Борисе, от, ну, війна.
How does it happen, Borys? They're shooting and you have to write a poem.
Ти не пишеш в режимі онлайн. Наприклад,
Well, you don't write online. For example, I came to Azov battalion and a young man approached me. He was 19 and a fellow countryman from the city of Cherkiv in the Ternopil Oblast. My daughters were older than him. He was just a kid and probably had never shaved his face with a razor. We got acquainted. A few hours later, I saw him on duty. He had a rifle, a helmet, and an armored vest. He was at a military post sitting on a log with a rifle in one hand and his mobile phone in the other hand. He sat down to write a message. At the moment, I thought it was to his girlfriend. Someone very important to him was on the other side, and it was uncomfortable to do this with one hand. But he would have had to put the rifle down to write the message with both hands. But he couldn't put it down because his life and the lives of his comrades depended on him. He was at a post. He tried to hold the rifle with his elbow and then on his knee.
Це краще. Але автомат випускати з рук не можна, бо від цього залежить твоє життя і життя твоїх побратимів. Ти на посту. І він намагався цей автомат притримати ліктем, коліньми. Це було дуже смішно і дуже кумедно. I
was quite amused, so I wrote a poem about what I saw. I wrote it and posted it on Facebook, and it received 5,000 likes and 1,000 reposts. Also, a lot of approval. And so it kept going. Then there was the second poem I called The Guard of Mariupol Outskirts, and that guard was surrounded by young boys who were picking berries and were actual kids until they heard the rumble of shelling, jumped off of the tree, spreading berry juice on their helmets, armor and guns, and turned into warriors in a matter of minutes. They went behind the horizon, and the mulberry tree looks after them and asks, "Where are you boys? Are you still alive or not?"
І Шовковиця виглядає за ними і запитує, де ви, хлопці, живі вони, не живі.
Ukrainian postmodernism is a rather frail and fragile phenomenon, which changed after these poems by Borys Humenyuk appeared. Like an asteroid that hits a planet and makes it change its course. Likewise, Ukrainian literature slightly changed its course with the advent of these bloody and tender poems. You can feel it while sitting next to Borys Humenyuk. What I see now is a picture that reminds me most of all of the titans of the Renaissance, when everything was done with talent. This is a painting by Borys Humenyuk, who is actually a poet, writer, and a military man. How do you do it, and when, Borys? I can actually do a lot, and as my beloved says jokingly, I can do everything except full-laying tiles. I never tried to do that.
Насправді художник це заголосно. Справді картина моя, я справді іноді пишу, але це більше релаксація.
Actually, I'm not really a painter. The painting is mine, and I paint sometimes, but it's more to relax. It's a kind of meditation, when I need to direct the excess of emotions in a creative direction instead of destructive. So there's an explosion that happens on the canvas. In this case, the quince exploded on this particular work, but it is not systematic. I'm not a professional artist. I'm an amateur. I don't think I'm going to systemize it all, or whether it is going to have some meaningful continuation.
Я не думаю, що я колись це все якось систематизую, і з цього буде щось, чи це буде мати якесь осмислене продовження.
Знаєте, Борис, я чесно скажу, я читаю вас, такої пристрасті, є одне оповідання, як старий прийшов.
I read your works. I have a passion for them. There's a story when a man came to your volunteer battalion and honestly said, "I have cancer. I'll die anyway. So let me go meet the separatists with a loaf of bread and some dynamite and blow up myself on them." And then there is the quince.
Підірву себе і їх. І я
How does it all fit?
І ось, будь ласка, айва. Як вас все це?
Це насправді фантастична історія цього чоловіка.
It is actually a fantastic story. This man is gone now. He's a Cossack and he has already joined our heavenly troops in heaven. I told this story very briefly in one page.
Буквально на одну сторінку її повів, але справді в багатьох культурах.
Actually, many cultures practice suicide bombing, if I can say so. Many cultures, and obviously not due to a good life.
це коли твоя маленька держава, коли твоя, може, немічна держава, коли твої якісь...
When you're a small state, probably a helpless state, when your pathetic armed forces cannot fight back some large aggressor, but there are 100 or 200 men, your compatriots, who say, we're ready to give our lives, but we're ready to say to the whole world that we're fighting. And when this man came and said, I'm dying anyway, I have cancer, don't let me go to waste like cattle, I'm ready to, relatively speaking, put on a suicide belt and go to the enemy lair and blow them up with myself. We were sitting there, conscripted soldiers, and were crying. It was something incredible.
В логово ворогів і висадити їх разом із собою на небо. Такі сиділи кваліфіковані вояки, кадрові вояки, такі як я, ми реально плакали, бо це було щось неймовірне. Ми не дали йому можливість це зробити.
We didn't let him do it, by the way. But in extreme stages of life of both individual people and the nation, good features of a collective national character are manifested, as well as the bad ones. It's just that I strive to see only the good in my people, and in the people who are next to me, who are doing more or less the same things that I do.
Просто я волію бачити хороше і в своєму народі, і в тих людях, які поряд зі мною, які роблять приблизно те, що роблю я.
Ну, знаєте, я вам чесно...
We usually read about literature, Ukrainian in particular, in books. But there is actually Ukrainian literature sitting right here in front of me. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Справжня українська література. Дякую, дуже вам дякую.